So this is actually a subject that I've been meaning to tackle for quite some time. Um, it looks like we might have severe buffering, but it's stormy in the jungle again. So if the buffering is driving you crazy, you can just pause the video for a few seconds and then start up again, and it should be good. Um, but yeah, so this is a subject that I've been meaning to tackle for a while because it's something that really bugs me. Um, when I was a kid in the early 90s, late 90s, and I guess, really about in junior high school, maybe even sixth grade, I started to become aware of the psychedelic movement and started reading, Timothy Leary and Aldous Huxley and all of this kind of stuff. And it immediately became obvious to me that the antidote to all of the ills in the world, all of the sort of unfair, um, beyond unfair, I mean, it's really kind of evil, the restrictions that are put on the sovereignty of the individual, and I right away that in order for a person to demand their sovereignty to be recognized, they have to be able to take responsibility for their conduct. And I knew that psychedelics combined with spiritual disciplines and self education um, was, a viable path to an illuminated society where people could have autonomy. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that the reason that was such a threat to the status quo is that illuminated people not only can be trusted to conduct themselves in a way that makes anarchy literally possible, but they will not tolerate being governed. And the establishment knew that. They knew as early as the mid 1950s that psychedelic compounds would allow people to rewrite their own programs. And so all of this propagandizing and religion and all of the stuff that they had used to condition the populace to make them manageable would be rendered useless. And that would be trillions of dollars down the drain. And so they really hated this movement that sought to expand consciousness and that sought the amelioration of mankind from sort of servitude of nationalism and religion and the indoctrination of every narrative under the sun, every political narrative you can name. Um, and so it came to be referred to as awakening or expanding consciousness, and it's a really appropriate term because what we're actually trying to awaken from is really just uh, the what is it called when something is the ruling the rule of the subconscious to try to make our being less of an automatic response to the environment. They say that something like 90% of our behavior is dictated to us by the subconscious. And the awakening, the reality that the truth about it is that it's really fundamentally about establishing connectivity across different regions of the brain and decreasing the governance of the subconscious over the conscious mind. And so when the woke movement started, it was an outgrowth of this psychedelic movement, of this spiritual awakening, of this progressive enlightenment. And it was totally sensible. It was totally reasonable. People were not trusting of the government. They didn't like big pharma. They weren't into corporate food. They were into psychedelics and yoga and all of these things that are catalysts to the kind of consciousness that is necessary if we were going to have the evolution in society that would allow us to extricate ourselves from the matrix gracefully, tactfully, tastefully, and to bring this back to Orwell, this is something that the creation of the flat earth, in my opinion, that whole movement was a propagandized it was propaganda, basically, plain and simple. I don't know what's going on with the internet connection, you guys. It says excellent condition, but then it keeps freezing. Yeah, it looks like it's probably pretty much unwatchable out there, which is unfortunate because this is a nobody has let me know in the comments either what's going on out there. It's unfortunate that I'm having so much trouble streaming, because I really have a lot to say about this stuff. But basically, long story short, they hijack movements from within and turn them against themselves. And this one bugs me the most because they have basically used this idea of awakening, of expanding your consciousness, of freeing yourself from, servitude and influence of political narratives. We may have to just abort mission and try the stream again. All right, well, I will attempt to continue for a few minutes, but I think the lag is probably too distracting. It's distracting the hell out of me. And if so, I'll try it again maybe earlier in the day before the thunderstorms hit tomorrow. But yeah, so they've taken what was the antithesis to the establishment, to fascism, to narrow-mindedness. It was a recognition by free-spirited, free-thinking, often very intellectual people that there was a way to forge a path forward, that there are limiting mechanisms in our consciousness that can be turned off or turned down, which allows us to make a connection with the universal mind, or there are a lot of different ways to talk about it, but for our purposes, let's call it the universal mind. And that there are compounds and there are practices that reliably produce states that diminish aberrations in people, that are capable of erasing the program that caused addiction, for example, that caused depression, that caused PTSD. All of these traumas that influence a person to be problematic in their communities and to their fellow man, that we have a reliable method or reliable methods to re-engineer ourselves, and that ultimately would leave us without the need for governance. And so they have turned that movement against itself. And I mentioned the flat earth and how I feel that was created just to make this negative association with conspiracy theorists, just so that they could say, like, look at all these idiots, how dumb they are. Nobody wants to be associated with this level of intelligence and lunacy. And there are other really good examples, in the 1960s and really all of the periods afterwards. There were a lot of people that really pushed for acceptance of homosexuals. No one should be persecuted or what is the word, prejudice against people for their sexuality. And it is a very noble cause to put yourself at odds with herd conformity, because you will be ostracized. It has been a very intense transition from the sort of conservative, religion influenced political disposition of the 1950s to the sort of radical self-expression of that sort of emerged in the late 1960s. But now that we have arrived in a place where that work was more or less done, people had no problems with homosexuals. Conservatives had become more comfortable with it. People had really made tremendous progress, and the end result, the net result of that progress, was unity. And when there's too much unity in a society and you have a very small group of people that have the reins, they are very much threatened. And so once you have people following a narrative, right? Once you